growing up was a better drama than we saw in the movies. She trusted me, and you cannot imagine what that meant to me. We never gave up on America.
Hello, I'm Jeff Cunningham, Professor of Global Leadership at Arizona State University and the Thunderbird School of Global Management, the world's foremost institution in developing business leaders around the globe. And so I'm pleased to welcome you to our Iconic Voices interview with Dr. Reatha Clark King. Hamlet said, "We know what we are, but not what we may be," and he easily could have been referring to the life of Dr. Reatha Clark King. Hers is the story of a trailblazing African-American woman who started life picking cotton in the fields of rural Georgia and not 20 years later graduated as a PhD in chemistry from the University of Chicago before going on to the Ivy walls of Columbia University, where she received her MBA. Her natural talent led her to the presidency of a major university and to being named a senior corporate officer of General Mills and subsequently to the boards of ExxonMobil and Wells Fargo. Now the girl who picked cotton in Georgia was picking CEOs in the boardrooms of major companies. Dr. Reatha Clark King's story is a page out of that volatile chapter of America's complex history. And she is a symbol for all of us that an undaunted spirit can rise above any adversity. Please welcome Dr. Reatha Clark King. If Hollywood were to make a movie about your childhood, would it be a comedy, a drama, or a romance?
It definitely would be a drama, filled with a blend of fear, love connected to family, and hoping for social change to bring about a better life for African American people, or as we called ourselves then, colored people. And I would see in that drama the picture of my neighbor, my church, country church, from ages 2 forward. That church is in my memory. I would see lots of work. Work was our theme. Work was our main theme. Sharecropping, living on the farm, and doing the field work. And that dominated my father's life, for sure, and my mom's life, because they needed to make ends meet. But the love part, that was vital, because that helped to keep us going too. My mother came from a large family, and there were always visitors of aunts and uncles. Her 4 sisters and 7 brothers. And then my father came from another large family, 11 sisters and 1 brother. They were always visiting. So we were hearing about Aunt Dora, Aunt Donna, Uncle Buster, Uncle Jap, all of the time. And when they came to visit, it was hugs and hugs and hugs, and they adored my mom and dad. So that was the love part. And then there was my grandmother. So there was some love in there, but it was to keep us going, and it came from family. There was hope, and that hope was connected with the fact that we children, as we went to grade school and showed our abilities in this one-room schoolhouse, which was also our church, we children were told that if we studied hard, we could go away, we had to go away, and educate ourselves so we can get better jobs than maid work or working in the field. And those were our options at the time. So we were told that there are other options for us. And just work hard, get an education. And a big motivator there was our teacher, our school teacher. She lived in the community. She roomed in the community during the weekdays, but she came from the big city of Thomasville, Georgia, nearby Thomasville, Georgia. So Miss Florence Frazier, she was a big talker anyway. She would tell everybody how smart those Clark girls are. And then the community people at church mostly would encourage us, child, get an education, and you can get out of this hot sun. You can find better work. So that was the drama. It actually growing up was a better drama than we saw in the movies. The Help, 12 years as a slave. None of those movies could depict accurately enough the kind of drama that we experienced growing up. There were so many dimensions of it. I said, so many stories have been told, and yet there are many more stories yet to be told.
Tell me about the world that your parents grew up in. How far were they removed from 1863 when slaves were emancipated?
I would say my mother was born in 1918, so they wasn't that far removed, because I recall growing up around her mother and then her grandmother, whose name was Lucy Brinson. She lived with my grandmother. So I got to know my great-grandmother very well. And she must have been either born into a slave home or the first generation outside of slavery.
What was that like, do you think, for someone to suddenly be emancipated and find themselves in rural America?
You see, the generations then became scattered, but I would say we scattered forward.
Did the families become scattered?
Yes, but we never lost that bond. We never lost the bond amongst the family members. Slavery put people on their own, but it made them dependent on one another within a family. And going north so you can get a better job and send money home. That was an ambition for so many people, particularly younger people, because of that interdependence amongst family members. That we were to roll the clock forward, World War II started, that send money home even took on a more special meaning, because that was the reason so many young black men joined the Army, wanted to go to the Army so they could get that monthly stipend to help mom and dad. You know, if they were not married, it went to mom and dad.
It's fair to say that you grew up with, and everyone you knew in your world grew up with, in what we call poverty.
Yes.
Extreme poverty?
I would say fairly extreme, except I would allow for the fact that we could raise what we ate on the farm. You see, even though you were sharecropping and you had those obligations to the people who hired you, you could raise as much as you want to eat. And sometimes you could get donations from, we call it the big house, to help you along in your family. My mother often brought things home that were given to her by the people she worked for. She was a maid often, and while my father was working in the field. Hand-me-down clothes and good tasting food, extra food, she would bring to us. So our family would have some food in addition to what we had gotten out of the field.
Did you have special Sunday dinners or special ceremonies where you had really good food on the table?
Absolutely. That was the meal where we had a chicken, we had meat, we had fried chicken. And we not only had those dinners in our home, and it was really special if the preacher came home to have dinner with us. We children got to eat the second round because there was not enough space to seat everybody at around the table when the preacher was there. That was a very special meal. The first Sunday of the month, we would serve a big meal on the grounds of the church. First Sunday was special. All the women wore white, and all the women wore big fancy hats. I still wear a hat to church. I inherited that habit from my mother, my grandmother. It was a custom for us. But yes, that was a special day, special meal. Now, things could get pretty lean during weekdays. I would say our nutrition habits were not that special. We didn't realize that collard greens were so healthy for you. We got tired of them. Syrup and bread and pork, those were mainstays. They weren't the healthiest of food. we got tired of watermelon, tired of the fruits and vegetables. They were good for us, but we learned all of those things later.
The church played a huge role, did it not, in the community?
It was so special. It carried that symbol of hope. You felt safe in the church, so it represented safety, a safe place to assemble, to go to. It was a nurturing place where the older people came together to encourage the younger people. It was a nurturing environment. You might say a threefold institutional setting. It was our school, it was our church, it was the place where the community could assemble. Institution-wise, it was the center of structure along with the family for our community. Early on, as you know, Negro spirituals grew out of that faith in God, that God would deliver us from the hardships that we suffered. Even slaves had their favorite songs, that they would send messages to each other. The church in our community that I grew up in symbolized that expression up from slavery that we now hear about. My grandmother insisted that everybody goes to church. So you became a churchgoer whether you desired to be one or not. And I still am a churchgoer, and I'm trying to influence my children to think the same way. As you can imagine, that's pretty hard for the millennial and the later generations. So, but I still find churches a good social space for me, a place to reflect, to think about what is going to happen the coming week, events of the past week. It's a place for me to reflect and to be grateful. The word gratitude is a very special one in my life.
At what point did you decide in your one-room schoolhouse that you had the makings of a chemistry PhD?
Well, it was during Black History Month, and at that time it was called Negro History Week. It was a one-week commemoration, celebration of the lives of blacks who had succeeded and become famous. But mainly we put the emphasis on those who had succeeded. And I learned about George Washington Carver, who was a chemist and who did many different things with a peanut, a simple peanut. Now we knew peanuts, you know, from the field. I learned then it was a time to get young people to believe, us young blacks, or to indoctrinate us with the notion that we were capable, that if we applied ourselves, we could do great things. We could make discoveries. We could be singers like Leotina Price, Marian Anderson, that was her day. We saw examples of blacks who had succeeded. And that gave us that motivated us to strive hard, to be somebody.
Was there a moment, was there a test that told you that you had this special gift?
Yes, I would say by the time I got to high school, say that was then 8th grade, high school, 7th, 8th grade, the grades were not organized like they are today, so systematically in the middle school, high school. By the time I got to high school, I started believing that myself. That was a transition moment for me because I became introduced to a wider range of teachers, and they would send messages home to my mother, especially, that her girls were good in school. That was encouraging to my mother because she wasn't educated, but yet she physically was a beautiful lady, but she was shy, a bit shy, because she didn't think her clothes were good enough to go around those educated people. But we were encouraged by our teachers primarily. Now these were teachers beyond Florence Frazier, who moved about the neighborhood. And I started to believe and sort of and appreciate my high scores in class, being able to get perfect scores. So once I started to believe in myself, appreciate myself, then I went on to excel even more.
How was slavery dealt with as a topic, either in school or at home?
We saw slavery is sort of an unfinished story the way it played out in my community growing up. There was great fear that blacks would get in trouble with the law. So you did not move as freely about in a community as we do today. There was a lot of yes ma'am and yes sir, speaking between whites and blacks, just like they did in slavery. Looking down when you talk to people rather than looking up and looking people in the eye. Looking people in the eye would show disrespect. Looking down would be show more respect toward the master, so to speak. When the slaves were freed, as is written about so much, the people were not free. We saw remnants of that time, of that tone in our society even later. Even going to the laws then were put in place to make the movement of blacks so restrictive that you could see the remnants of slavery still remaining. Like going to the back of the bus when you got on the Trailway bus. 1954, when I went away to college, what did I do? I put my foot locker on the bus and I went to the back of the bus and I was seated there.
And you didn't give it a second thought?
I didn't give it a second thought. And my mother, when she put me on the bus, she reminded me, now you go right to the back of the bus and you keep your seat. Don't get out of place. Being out of place was bad news, typically for blacks. So there are two questions I would ask today about slavery. When did it end and when did the people feel free?
When you were growing up, did you ever see evidence of some of the really crude behavior, and I'm referring to things like Ku Klux Klan and cross burnings or episodes like that?
I did not see them personally. There would be rumors and feedback in the neighborhood of when somebody had gotten out of place and done something against the law. The person would go into hiding and there would be a search for that person. Saturday nights typically would all be at home, lock our doors, hoping that the police would not knock on our door. Fear, that word fear, is just a terrible notion back then because a community could be overcome by fear. That's, I find, what's so hard for the movies to depict, the level of fear and how intense it was in communities.
One of the jobs you had was picking cotton.
Oh, yes.
Now, for most of us, that's a cliche, but for you, it was very real. What was that like?
It was a summary, as I think about it first, hard work. I mean, really hard work. Secondly, the image that comes to mind was the reality of getting up early in the morning. My sister and I would get out of bed, get up at 4 a.m. in the morning because we needed to get to the field while the dew was still out damp on the cotton, and naturally it would weigh more. So having the truck pick you up early in the morning is a memory I won't forget. So the hard work, early rising, and next came the hot sun. This is the order that things happen in. Wishing for the sun to be directly overhead. You know what time that is? Noontime. And you know what time that is? Time you could take a break to eat, to take your packed lunch out and sit under the shade. And then going back to the field and working until about 5 o'clock, a little later. The hot sun. I mean, the sun was hottest around 2 or 3 o'clock. I don't know what the astronomers say, the hottest time, the sun bearing down, but it was hot. So, and then the beginning of the season, your body would get very sore. And then later in the season, it seems to have adapted to this new work style for the season. But you know what your goal was for the day? We were goal-oriented. My goal was 200 pounds of cotton to pick at 12 years old. So 200 pounds of cotton, you know how much I would earn? $6, $3 per 100. That was the goal. And my older sister could pick even more. So I wanted to keep up with her. So we But now my mother was working in a home as a maid during this time, and she only let us go to work for families that she considered trusted families. See, we were young girls, young children, and she let us work on the farm for people that she trusted, and we also worked in their tobacco farms, helped gather tobacco, but picking the cotton. Now, that was a harsh life then, but now I ask myself, being the optimist I am, what good came from it? I would say the ability to work hard. But not wanting to go back to that life, I don't want to. But my gosh, I learned to work hard from that life.
But you were good at it.
I was good at it, yes. I was good at it, and I don't know whether that was part of my nature, wanting to be good at whatever I did. Possibly it was, because though my grandmother was illiterate, that was something she indoctrinated us with, and that is, if anything is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Now those were her words, and I can remember them hearing them all through my upbringing.
So where did these children and grandchildren of slaves get the idea that life could be better through education so that they could pass that on to their granddaughter? Where did that happen?
Well, that was, they call it the Underground Railroad, the movement of people, but that was a channel for communicating from north to south and all about our communities, telling us how to escape hardship. And that word escape is a pretty edgy word there, but how to get beyond, if I were to make it more gentle, the hardship that you and I experiencing, how to overcome barriers. You got that word by what people told you who came from north. You see, all of your relatives who had moved north came back to visit, and supposedly blacks had better conditions up north.
Was there, to your knowledge, was there ever a movement or an interest in forsaking America for a better life, either back in Africa or another country?
No. We never gave up on America. Thinking life would be better in another country.
You had an experience around the time you were going to college, yes, that changed your world, did it not? It had to do with summer jobs that you were taking in New York.
My mother permitted me to come north during the summertime and work as a maid. We call it the Thursday Maid. I lived with a family in Pauling, New York, near Poughkeepsie. I lived with the Dan family, and my first assignment, my first summer after my freshman year, I was about 17 years old. I was to babysit their little son, Harvey. And then after my sophomore year, I would go back during the summertime on the train. My mother, I would travel from Atlanta, Georgia, travel up to Penn Station, New York City, would be picked up, taken to Pauling, and then eventually I advanced to help as a cook. I gave up on babysitting little Harvey, and I became helper to Mrs. Dan in the kitchen. And I had that maid job for each of my 4 summers in college. Even after I graduated in '58, the summer between going to the University of Chicago and graduating from Clark College in Atlanta, I worked as a maid in Pauling, New York, and saved my money. But the educational part of the experience, there were many educational parts, but the main one was my Thursday off, when Mrs. Dan would write out a sightseeing list for me, list of places for me to go to sightsee. And I would then, she would put me on the train, and I would come into, I think, Grand Central Station then, and then I would get off the train and follow the list that she had given me exactly, and go back to the train station at the appointed time, and I saw the New York Opera Place, I saw Empire State Building. I just saw all of the beautiful sights of New York, the landmark sites, and then she would tell me, and this was a touching part and caused me to really believe in her. She said, if you see anything you want to buy, she gave me her charge cards. I can go to Saks Fifth Avenue, the beautiful stores along Fifth Avenue, and buy something if I wanted to. She trusted me. And you cannot imagine what that meant to me. I didn't buy anything because she would always send me a nice gift back at college, you know, at Christmas time. She would remember me. But so I became introduced to the big city, the big city beyond Georgia, New York City. And I became more aware of the world back through that Maid experience. And so my Maid experience was very different from my mom's Maid experience. And you know what? When I went back home for my break between, in September, between New York and going to Clark, you know what my mom wanted me to do? Make meatloaf. I learned how to make meatloaf with Mrs. Dan, and that was fancy food. She loved that. She said, I want you to make me some meatloaf every time I go home.
And no doubt you made a heck of a meatloaf.
Oh, I did. But, you know, today I don't want to make any meatloaf.
Did Mrs. Dan give you a different face on humanity, on black and white relations that you hadn't seen before?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We had heard that there were whites helping blacks through the emancipation movement, the abolitionists, helping to fight discrimination, change the laws so blacks would be treated better. But we had not seen them openly. You see, in the South, you didn't see those people openly because they would have been called ugly names. I saw that, I experienced that firsthand with Mrs. Dan. She provided opportunities for us that we didn't have elsewhere. So she and her friends around the Quaker Hill community, we lived on Quaker Hill, they provided some opportunities for us young college women, black college women. I wonder if that was their motive, whether they needed the help. They could have hired maids elsewhere, but why did they reach out to us in the South? And that was a wonderful opportunity for me, and it was like getting a second degree. I got one college degree from Clark College in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had another world of learning in New York from those experiences.
How did you go from picking cotton to being a PhD in chemistry?
Well, in a nutshell, it was wanting to be like some role models I had identified in college. I had identified some professors there who were really, really top-notch in their fields, tremendous role models for me because they were so good at what they did. They were excellent, and they stood out. And those professors, along with the president of Morehouse College, a neighboring college, Benjamin Mays, they had all attended the University of Chicago. So when I had the opportunity for this Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, which I was offered when I was a senior at Clark College, I said, I want to be like them. So I was imitating these excellent black people. It struck me too, it did not escape me that they were black Americans. And the University of Chicago at that time, now this was in 1958, had a reputation for being a good place for blacks and Jews. So that stigma about being a black had not escaped, had not been washed out of every culture in America. It was there. But the University of Chicago had a reputation for being a top-notch school and a good place for blacks and Jews.
It turned out that PhD wasn't enough for you. You had to go get your MBA at Columbia.
Some women at the American Council on Education encouraged me to think about a presidency of a university. That's when the gender bias surfaced very strongly. It was there back in graduate school. Stereotypes against women pursuing advanced degrees Because there was a belief, there was a doubt that we had the capability to study those hard sciences. Here in higher education, at the high levels of administration, it was there was a feeling that well, it hadn't been done, and women were just not offered the opportunities. And so I wanted to show that I could manage do the financial administration, handle financial management of institutions and organizations.
And the result was, shortly afterwards, you were made president of Metropolitan.
Metropolitan State University in Minnesota.
It was in Minnesota that you came to the attention of Brewster Atwater?
Yes.
Was it not?
Yes.
The CEO of General Mills?
Yes.
Tell us about what you were thinking about going into corporate life after being president of a university.
I was so happy with my position as president of the university, so I was torn. And Bruce didn't give me much time to think about it. He said, I'd like to come over and talk with you. And this was at about 11 o'clock in the morning. Bruce came that afternoon. He drove across town himself. General Mills is in the suburbs there around Minneapolis. He came over to my office in St. Paul, and then I was posed with another problem. I got to clean up my office here, clear some of this paper up. Anyway, I talked with Bruce about the position, and by the end of the day, I was really torn. And I was observant, though. I was struck by Bruce, something he handed me. We talked for about 30 minutes about the opening. And then he handed me one thing that he had in his hand, Statement of Corporate Values, a little threefold document with, I think, about 8 points on it, Statement of Corporate Values. And when he left, I read this little document, and I thought to myself, if they do what they say they aim to do in these values, I think I would enjoy working with them then. I was impressed by that, but he didn't bring an annual report, anything bigger. It was that one statement of corporate values. That was a message for me. It said something about him. It said something about the culture of the company. So I started to think about it. Then I went home and told my husband and my 2 sons, and we just went from there. I wanted to know their opinion. Naturally, they didn't know what to do. They said, Mom, we don't know. However, that oldest son, he might be wrong, but he's never in doubt. He said, Mom, you should take that job. You should take that job. So he gave me the nudge.
And you did. So you had another similar situation after you had taken on the General Mills officership. Mm-hmm. You received another call about going on the board of ExxonMobil.
Oh, yeah.
Also, you were also a director of Wells Fargo.
It was another point of reflection for me, time of reflection. I was inclined not to do it because I was enjoying what I was doing very much, and I felt that my plate was pretty full, was very full. I've been a working mom, very demanding positions, now right in the midst of a very exciting job at General Mills, and I was already serving on some other corporate boards. So I was concerned about the full platter of responsibility, and I just loved my family as well, my family life. My husband and I enjoyed a full life there in Minnesota. So I said to the headhunter that I felt that I couldn't consider the position he had in mind. He hadn't told me the name of the company, but anyway, I was going to decline. And the headhunter politely went away, and then he came back again a few months later, and he and I eventually met, and he traveled there to Minnesota, and I was hesitant again, and he persisted, and so that's the way it happened. But there was one point of attraction for me. He said it's an energy firm, it's an energy company, and that's my field in thermochemistry. It's my specialization for my doctorate degree, thermochemistry, and I had that marvelous position at the Bureau of Standards working on projects for the space program. So I was you can say I was a rocket scientist, but I was definitely a thermochemist. We were always burning things, setting things on fire. So the energy was close to my heart. And I said, as a matter of fact, it is the closest board affiliation in terms of academic discipline focus that I've had in terms of my studies. So that was appealing, but I was still concerned about being able to do things well and to do that responsibility well and having an overly full platter. So finally the headhunter said, well, the CEO would like to come and meet with you here in Minneapolis. And the CEO did come, and we had breakfast along with Marilyn Carlson Nelson, who was already on their board. And that was, the CEO said they were going to offer me the position of the director position on their board. And it was about a month before, and not a year before, that I learned that the company was ExxonMobil. And I realized it was an impressive company, impressive responsibility, but my main concern was doing it well. Excellence, I've always been pulled by the notion of excellence and being effective. So that was the pull, and certainly in this position I would want to do that well. Then I was concerned, there was another concern. Would my boss allow it for me to go on an additional corporate board? So I went to my supervisor at General Mills and I told him that I had been approached. He looked at me, he said, I knew it already. So that relieved me a lot. And then I prepared my husband and I to go on to Malaysia, where I was elected to the board.
Did it occur to you that you had come a long way on this journey?
You know, my grandmother used to say, you've come a mighty long way. There's a song, you've come a mighty long way. And without having to put the dimensions how far you've come, I could say that any day.
With a name like King, you're probably occasionally asked if you're related to Dr. Martin Luther King. And the answer is?
Yes, I'm asked that question quite a bit, and I love the question. That's my, and it's interesting where I'm asked that question by adults, but especially in schools. I do quite a few school visits, and the school children have a way of asking that question in funny ways. Once a little first grader asked me if I was his mother. I said, no, not yet, not yet. But then I visited a fourth grade class not too long ago, and they wanted to know if I was related and then if I had ever met him. No, not related at all. We were asked the question a lot because my husband grew up there in Birmingham, Alabama, and I went to I'm a native Georgian, and certainly I have visited his father's church, Ebenezer Baptist Church. His father was just a very common visitor to my campus, Clark College, when I was in college. And I still see his sister, who's a retired professor from Spelman College, when I go to events at Ebenezer, but I'm not related.
And he left a legacy.
Yes.
Is America fulfilling that legacy, or where are we missing?
We are not, well, first let me preface, we have improved, but we are not fulfilling the legacy yet. And there are any number of quotes by him that suggest that why we have ways to go. It says that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's one of the quotes. And when you think about the meaning of that statement, it says to me that our improvements are not secure until we have eliminated the injustice in a lot of different places. So we got to snoop out all the places where people are being treated unjustly and correct those problems as well. So I can look at the problems of racial discrimination and the injustices caused to people because of that kind of discrimination. And then we go on to women discrimination because of gender. And then we come to age bias, discrimination because of age. We got to eliminate all of these sources of injustice in order to realize the human potential.
Dr. King was a leader. Do we have the leadership today that is necessary to get people beyond those biases?
I think we do have some leaders that they are not the sort of commanding figures like Dr. King, who took that to be his calling along the way. Mahatma Gandhi took that to be his calling along the way, and so many other leaders. But we have leaders on different levels who are working toward the same end goal. I think what is important for them is they don't give up. Now in neighborhoods, hope, that word hope is a powerful motivator, sustainer for people who are trying to overcome the odds. Don't give up, don't give up. Dr. King realized that he couldn't do that job by himself. He needed the help of these neighborhood people and the congressmen and many other people to help get the job done. He sounded the bell and pulled us forward, got our attention, but he couldn't do the whole job there. So the burden is on the rest of us now.
When you look back, what do you say to your mentors?
First, I would say thank you. Thank you to them. I have a tremendous feeling of indebtedness and gratitude to all people who have helped me and encouraged me. That encouragement meant a great deal. Even my late husband. I say thank you, thank you. And some were learned and some were illiterate. They believed in me. I would say thank you for believing in me. And they saw in me something I didn't know I had.
What do you say to a young African-American boy or a girl, 6, 7, 8 years old, going to school in Harlem and not sure where their life is going to lead? What do you say to them to give them hope?
Never give up, never give up, never give up. Now that's easier said than done, but believe in themselves, keep on developing their skills and ability. And I wouldn't tell them be patient, but I would say it will take time for even you to realize your potential, to do good, to solve that problem. I have picked up chemistry books when I was a kid, for example, not knowing exactly how I was going to solve that tough problem. But I keep looking at it and tinkering with the pencil, and then I'm on the path to getting it solved. So that's what I mean by the solution won't come overnight. But gotta believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. And believe that you deserve that opportunity. Now, young people today will have it a little easier than we had it, because many in society were telling us we didn't deserve the opportunities. Innately, we didn't deserve that opportunity. But so many people are telling them they do deserve that opportunity. So that should cause a cultural change. But every now and then, there are going to be sources of doubts, reasons for them to doubt themselves. And that's when we can say, don't give up.